If you are a devoted Lance Mindheim fan and follow his no-nonsense philosophy in building and switching layout, you'll be pleased to know that Lance has just released his first volume for his Short Lines You Can Model series titled Miami Swamp Rat. This is an abstract yet colorful adventure in a hidden artery of one of America's most iconic and famous cities that follows a mysterious sun-bleached locomotive down a now forgotten journey. From a detailed and captivating mysterious backstory to photographs, pop culture references, maps, diagrams, superbly topped off with a plot twist at the end, here is Lance with his Miami Swamp Rat.
Lance, I'm flattered and honored to make your acquaintance.
Same
It
here.
doesn't happen often to meet the author of books you like. So thank you for your time today. But I thought it'd be a fun excuse to talk about this amazing book that you put together, your Swamp Rat.
Well, thank you. Can you zoom in on your layout? I haven't ever seen that.
Oh, sure. If you would like, I can actually bring you a little bit closer. And then, so I have a fiddle yard like you recommended. I do have storage shelves, again, like you recommended. I did indulge in a lamp from a railway crossing. And then there's really not much to it. It's just a lead that brings to, this is a bit of a challenge if I feel like spending more time switching. Otherwise, I have a couple of simple industries that serve, a couple of freight cars. And it takes me about 20, 30 minutes to switch an industry, and it's extremely relaxing and enjoyable. Nothing crazy, just slowly putting this together. An excuse to be part of the local railway club.
So fire away with your questions. I am prepared to be grilled.
Here's the first thing that I actually noticed about this particular book, your Swamp Rat. This is not your classical technical book, and I have some oldies here just because for fun. But you remember some of these. These are probably some of the books that we grew up with when we started building our first layouts, right? Scenery and plan tracking ideas. I found that this book is not technical at all. Like there aren't any electrical guides. You're not telling me which DCC system to use. So my question was, are we building a stage and we're watching actors play? It feels very much like looking at your original book, Model Railroading as Art. You're doing more of it's less technical, it's more like building a stage or a painting than it actually is what it used to be when you bought these books, where it was like, okay, it's exactly 4 feet by 6 feet. You got to have this kind of radius. So are we left to be the artist and you're just telling us the idea? How does that work for you in these cases?
I think every person is differently. I mean, satisfaction can come from a couple places. Number one is what you just described. And sometimes it's just very relaxing just to put stuff together. I mean, glue part A to point, you have just a pile of nothing, and then a month later it's something. I mean, so just putting it together can be satisfying. But I do think that there can be a big artistic aspect to it. I mean, that's something that's fascinating to me. How do we get beyond just the technical to the artistic, which is far more complex. It is much harder to be a good artist than a good technician. And I think to an extent, that's where a lot of the enjoyment comes from. And I think, like you, I think that the whole psychology fascinates me in terms of why people do, not just in model railroading, but in life. And I'll take the higher road and not get into why people do what they do or don't do. But and it gets indirectly to the trains thing is I think what we're trying to do for a lot of us is it's a mental bridge between something very positive that happened and then seeing it in miniature in front of us. And to that extent, I'm finding more and more that the more I go back and rail fan and go out and see the real thing, the more I enjoy the modeling. So we have a positive experience rail fanning by ourselves or with our friends. And this is just kind of a link between the two. And I feel bad for, many parts of the world don't have that luxury of being able to go out and see the real thing. I'm fortunate, but I do think it really enhances it, being able to have those experiences and then make the bridge between the two.
So this brings me to my second question then, because I feel that your book, Model Railroading as Art, is almost like the lead into then your Swamp Rat book, because you're putting your philosophy into action at this point. You're being less focused on design, and it sounds to me like you're more focused on composition of the scene. You're very much about the river and how that plays a role in the railway. You're very much about how the scenery and the plants bring that scene together. And I find that you're almost breaking what I would call as a model railroading by law, where everything has to be prototypical. Like one of the first things you did actually in your Swamp Rat book is that the lead that takes you to the CSX line, you're like, well, it's not convenient in the corner that I have it, so I'm just going to have it pointing it the other way. I found that surprisingly liberating. What makes you feel, I guess, I don't know, breaking the rules of, being able to take something that's so prototypical that most people seem to be very rigid about, and making it work for yourself?
Because, and I got this question before, not so politely put, and I do have enormous respect for prototype modelers, but here's the thing, Leo. We can never be a prototype modeler. It is absolutely impossible. We have no room, and even like the swamp rat, that's a mile long. It would take, how many feet would it take to do that? So yeah, so we have to accept the fact that we can never be a prototype modeler, and as soon as you accept that, then you have to move on to, okay, the reality is we don't have room. So how can we manipulate and compose that to capture the same general feel? And that's where the challenge and the skill comes in, or the artistic aspect, because you just can't do it. So what gets sent, what do you crop out, what do you flip, what do you add, what do you keep, how do you manipulate things? And to me, that's the fascinating part of it. But there is no such thing as a prototype modeler. And anybody that thumps their chest and says they are, I'm like, take out your tape measure and, let's see how this scales out. And then the reality is certain things are more interesting. Some things just don't really fit in a layout. So that's where the decisions have to be made. And it's interesting with the model railroading as art is, of all of my ramblings, the one that is the one that people would just say, shut the H up, I don't want to hear it, is the one that I stick to the most, is that if you want to become a good modeler, you're not going to get it in the sandbox of model railroading. I mean, all the answers have been in the art world. And to the extent that you can draw on the principles that have been developed, for thousands of years, the better your work will become. And it's a pretty fun ride. I mean, every city, even a mid-sized city of 100,000 people, has the resources available. And the three courses you want to take are visual literacy, composition, and color theory. That will take you everywhere. And then you just go to the museum and you just get these college art students that are enthusiastic and bright, put you in front of a painting and explain how it came together. And I think where people get off track is, I would say of 1,000 people, 999 say, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. And then they get back on forums, but I'm going to stick to that, as that's really the path to improving your game. And the other thing it does is, it's not the kind of thing where you take a class and have to take notes, although I did, but just being exposed to it, you're going to build a sense of intuition where, a year or two down the road, just have a intuitive sense in terms of how to pull a scene together and how to spread things out.
You seem to, in this book here, put a focus on major completion first, detail later. Do you find that people are getting bogged down on sort of the detail right away and they never finish their project? Is it better to get the basics done and then work on that? Like, what is it that you were trying to tell us, I guess, with that philosophy in mind?
Well, I guess my writing skills are improving, because that's exactly what I was trying to say, is that I do think that, I mean, we're all human. We need a sense of making progress without getting bogged down. And particularly with complex designs, it's sad. I just see so many people leaving the hobby. So get the track up, just do exactly what you've done, and just make passes. You can either stop where you are and enjoy it, or replace things, add more detailed passes. But what you have behind you is really what I'm trying to encourage people to do. Get it up and running, then you're motivated. You've got some success, as opposed to just having something that doesn't run with one difficult project after another. So you need momentum is really important, and
And
people.
encouragement and success, I suppose, in having that positive feedback that you can write on to continue on.
Right. I mean, I think, very judgmental. I just try to push people to have what you have behind you.
I'm quite flattered to hear that. Well, which brings me to my last question, Lance. Why trains? And the reason I'm asking is, why trains out of all the hobbies? And I asked myself that very same question. Out of all the hobbies this world offers, why model trains?
And I'll take that a step further. I would say, why miniatures? I don't know. And I think about it a lot. All I can come to is there's something in our DNA that draws us to that. And for that reason, I don't think the hobby will ever die, because there is always going to be some 11-year-old kid that, because of his genetic predisposition, is going to be fascinated by this. And I don't know the answer to your question. What is it that we're so drawn to it? I think it really is the backdrop. I mean, just the motion behind it, the structures, the theater aspect of it. I mean, that's as good as I can do. So why are people drawn to trains and not trucking? Why are they drawn to trains more than aircraft? But it's always been there. And why, when the thing you wonder is, you hear about the hobby dying, probably a third of the people that I talk to are less than 35. So it's not, not dying. So I'm sorry to disappoint you. I cannot give you an answer. I've been trying
Oh
to.
no, I'm actually pleased because I don't have an answer for myself either. I enjoy this because for me it's soothing. For me it's therapeutic. To me it's meditation. For me, maybe it's silly to see this as a form of philosophy, but the whole concept of slowing it down. I go to work, I take care of kids, I have a million things I got to worry about. There's a mortgage, there's bills. The news are not exactly fun and exciting. At the end of the day, when everything's done and your brain is done and handle a million things, you come down here and you run a train real slow. It slows your brain down. It calms you down. It becomes almost like a moment to self-reflect. It becomes a moment of almost to maybe I'm not on my knees with my eyes closed humming and contemplating the universe, but maybe in my own way, I'm bringing myself into that state of peace of mind to face another day the next day by just taking it down a notch.
Another observation, totally unrelated to any of this, is I'm curious, how long have you been in the hobby to one extent or the other?
Oh, not very long. Probably 3 years now.
That's interesting to me, that how some people, and I've got friends like that. I've got a guy, Brad, local. 6 years ago, he went from zero to being this unbelievable modeler. I mean, it's just interesting how that the seed pops. And the one thing I have noticed, those that have more prototype leanings, I mean, whether you and I have kind of proto freelance, but we're still interested in how the prototype does it, seem to stay with the hobby longer than more of the fantasy recreationalists. I don't know why that is, but guys like you tend to stick with it till they drop at age 90. Whereas I've got, other people that, more interested in the fantasy aspect of it. It's like, oh, we need a hobby, husband and wife, we need a hobby, we're retired. And not to cast judgment or anything, but they don't tend to stick with it as long. I don't know why that is. It's interesting to me.
I found it, to be honest with you, it's surprising how well received it was from family. Mind you, I did make it look like it belongs in the room. It doesn't look like just a piece of plywood against the wall. But it's interesting when guests come over, they are also very much intrigued by it. They want to play with it. They like the concept of the manual ground truth, the tactile feel, the sound. And I wonder sometimes in a way we're all into the hobby. The fascination seems to be there. Like even my mother-in-law, actually, she was very intrigued by this, and I was quite surprised. I didn't think that she would even be. Maybe there's a little bit of stigma in me as well. Like here's a grown man playing with toy trains when you think about it. And meanwhile the response has been very positive and very encouraging. People see the weathering on a warehouse building and they're like, wow, that's really well done. And again, that's part of your lesson. I forget which book now here, to bring a soul to what you're doing, right? Like I think it's actually, isn't it Moral Eroding as Art? I don't remember. There's something here where you're talking about how, even something as mundane as this, can you bring it to life? So I try to apply that there because sometimes people are fascinated by the simplest of things. Like I have a road and they're amazed by the fact that the road looks dirty. Maybe it's those details that bring people in and fascinate them. I honestly don't know. I like playing with trains. Really, that's what it comes down to. It makes me very happy, and I'm not gonna stop because of any other reason at this point.
Yeah, in terms of the books, I kind of hit the point where I hit all the major subjects, and enough. I have no interest in how to glue part A to part B. Everybody's done that. So the thing with the swamp rat is kind of the new direction I'm taking things. And the hard part is with writing is it's threading the needle. You go too far in one way, it is just boring as hell. XYZ Railroad was built in 1970 you got his charter, and then your head hits the desk and you fall asleep. And on the other side, it can be so trite and corny that it's embarrassing. So you've got to hit that plausible part in the middle, which is.
Well, I think you did a pretty good job. I mean, I'm not want to ruin it for other people that are going to read the book. The conclusion is amazing, blew my mind. The voodoo part, I did not expect that. That was, and the way you modeled it, that was hilarious. I had a good laugh out of that. The crime behind it, like the history behind it, the news articles, like to me you built, here's a story here, you also tied it to popular culture. Here's a bridge that you would have seen in this show. Here's this piece of evidence. Here are photos that reflect how things look like. To me it was a good setting the stage again, building, you were doing the composition again. You were using words to paint as a picture of how this painting should look like, and then we drew that picture in our head, and you gave us some ideas at the end of how that picture might actually look like. So to me that was beautifully written. It was entertaining. Like I said, I finished the book the day I got it. Sadly, I wish I'd spent more time. I'm probably going to read it again, but it was really enjoyable. I've enjoyed every book you've written, but this by far, I'm hoping you do more like this, because this was, philosophically I learned a lot, but that's what I wanted. I wanted to be entertained. I wanted to be made to think, but I didn't want to be told how to glue A and B. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Lance, I had a great time. Thank you for the books you write. Thanks for inspiring me.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. All right. Talk to you later.
So what you got here was a small portion of the interview that actually revolved around the book, which, by the way, if you're interested in, I've linked Lance's page about it in the description. Lance and I ended up speaking for much longer, but when you really enjoy speaking with someone, our conversation quickly derailed from its original topic. Lance is an incredibly eloquent and amiable person with an infectious personality. He is funny, delightful, humorous, but isn't shy for calling something for what it is. I had a great time, and for the part that you got to listen to, I hope you did too.